websites.
The 2020 Dionysus Awards, next time on Philosophy Talk.
Listen to Philosophy Talk every Tuesday at noon on KSJE 90.9 FM, Farmington. KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, here to meet your urgent and emergent medical needs, whether they are COVID-19 related or not. Medical emergencies happen when you least expect them, whether it's a stroke, heart attack, illness, or injury. San Juan Regional Medical Center's caregivers are here to provide care to you and your loved ones. Find out more online at sanjuanregional.com. Minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Monday morning, July the 6th. Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Micklin. Thanks for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM over the air in San Juan County, 103.3 FM over the air in Durango, Colorado, and of course streaming everywhere from our website at ksje.com. Also broadcasting our visual radio programs everywhere through the KSJE YouTube channel and through our Facebook page. We're glad that you are with us as well, viewers. Coming up in just a few moments, we'll be talking with Elsa Lopez from she'll be talking to us from Albuquerque, I should be saying, and we're talking about a new study that is out about the economic well-being of Latino and Hispanic families in New Mexico. We'll be talking a bit about that and much, much more coming up in the next few moments right here on KSJE, so stay tuned for that. At 8:50 on Mondays, of course, we always talk technology. We'll do that again later on this hour with Lewis Campbell from Synergy Computer Systems here in Farmington. That you will hear this morning at 8:50 on KSJE. At 9 a.m., it is our local information program on Mondays and Thursdays about the coronavirus, COVID-19. This morning, Megan Cullip and I will be speaking with Mike Mestis, the San Juan County Emergency Manager. Also, we'll be speaking with Stacy Beal, who has been working with a bunch of volunteers, in fact, a small army of volunteers making masks for needy organizations in the area, and that demand is increasing. We'll talk more about why that is coming up this morning at 9 a.m. live on YouTube and Facebook, of course. A rebroadcast of the program this afternoon at 5:06 p.m. on KSJE, so we invite you to tune in when it's convenient for you. At 9 on the radio, Mick Hess takes us roving with the arts, and this morning Mick is playing music from the composer Charles Ives, his collection of compositions, Holidays in New England. You'll hear that this morning at 9:06 a.m. right here on KSJE. Don't forget, in addition to Facebook and YouTube, we invite you to connect with us on Twitter and on Instagram as well. And let's check the weather forecast before we get going this morning. It's going to be sunny this week, sunny and hot this week. Today and tomorrow, 97 for a high in Farmington. Mid to lower 60s overnight. On Wednesday, 95, 96 for a high on Thursday, 99 with sunshine on Friday. And take a look at the weekend, triple-digit temperatures in the forecast so far for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. 101 and 100 degree temperatures and overnight lows, mid to upper 60s. Well, let me turn to my guest who is joining us via Zoom this morning, and Elsa Lopez is joining us today. Good morning. Thank you for joining me today.
Good morning, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you very much. And of course, you are with Somos Un Pueblo Unido, which we have had you on before, and we appreciate you coming back. And your group was instrumental in calling for this survey to see kind of how Latino and Hispanic families were faring in New Mexico with COVID-19, the coronavirus.
That's correct, Scott. Somos Un Pueblo Unido is a statewide immigrants' rights and workers' rights organization in New Mexico. We've been active for 25 years, organizing in at least 10 counties in New Mexico. Right now, we're active in 8, including San Juan County. We have over 3,000 members in New Mexico. And initially, when the pandemic hit, it obviously hit everyone. And we were hearing directly from our familias. We have a lot of members in San Juan County, in McKinley County, Rio Arriba, Santa Fe, and then the southeast corner, Chavez, Lee, Curry, Roosevelt. So we started to hear, the uneasiness about not just the health affect the health impact, but the economic impact right away.
Right. And so talk to me a little bit about then the idea to do a survey of families in our state and to kind of find out exactly how big of an impact COVID-19 was having on them. You worked with another group called Latino Decisions, correct?
Yes, we worked in conjunction with many other organizations throughout the state of New Mexico, including El Centro de Igualdad y Derechos, Partnership for Community Actions, New Mexico Voices for Children. But then we decided to partner with Latino Decisions, which is a well-known national pollster organization. They do many polls throughout the country to really take a pulse on many issues that impact Latino families. So like I was saying, when we initially started to see how the pandemic was impacting our families, we wanted to really take a snapshot of what, of what it was like for other familias all over New Mexico. And so we, this Latino Decisions actually surveyed close to 500 Latino families, and all of them had at least one minor child in their care. So we wanted to see what was the impact, not just for them as adults, but also for their children. And we have been hearing from our familias immediately because, unfortunately, the CARES Act, which was the second main stimulus package that was passed to relieve families that were directly impacted by the pandemic, excluded undocumented immigrants, but also more importantly, and I think a lot of people don't know this, it excluded anyone who is married and does taxes jointly with a person in their family who's undocumented. So many of our families are in what we call mixed status families. Some people are undocumented, some people are citizens. 1/3 of undocumented immigrants in New Mexico have at least one U.S. citizen child. So that's a lot of families that have been directly impacted.
Interesting. And so if I understood you correctly, then when you were talking about that, it sounds like that even though there was maybe a U.S. citizen in the family, if they were married to an undocumented immigrant, they would not be eligible for that assistance that was passed earlier this year, as you mentioned, right?
That's right. In order to receive the CARES Act, a stimulus check, as everybody knows it better, the $1,200 payment per adult and $500 per child, the family that when they do taxes must include everyone's social security number. So contrary to popular belief, undocumented immigrants actually pay income taxes. Not only do we pay property taxes and sales taxes, but we also pay income taxes through a system that was actually designed by the Internal Revenue Service. The federal government issues a 9-digit number to anyone who's a foreign national and does not qualify for a social security number. So in New Mexico, the 60,000 undocumented immigrants pay around $60 million annually in taxes. And so when the CARES Act, what happened is that unfortunately they didn't care whether you pay taxes, income taxes or not. They just said, if you file jointly, everyone in that tax return must have a valid social security number. So not only did it exclude the U.S. citizen who is in that family, but also the adult, but the U.S. citizen child or children.
Interesting. And so when we look at the survey results, Elsa Lopez, it looks like the majority, though, did get some of this assistance, correct? When the numbers that you sent out, and you had a press conference last week that included the mayor of Aztec was there and some other folks from around the state who had signed letters in support of your concerns about not everyone getting this help from the federal government, correct?
That's right. According to the Latino Decision survey results, 70% of Hispanic families did receive some form of stimulus payment.
Now that's everybody. That is legal, resident, undocumented. That's surveying everybody, correct?
Everyone who has a social security number.
I see.
Anyone who does not have a social security number which means they don't have legal status, was excluded from the CARES Act.
But not excluded from your survey.
not excluded from our survey, exactly.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And so, but some of the other things that the survey found that I thought was very interesting, which is another reason why I wanted to have you on the program this morning, was 20% of Hispanic families in New Mexico have had someone in their household lose their job since COVID-19. So that's since March?
That's right, and that's challenging because one of the things that we kept hearing right off the bat, when the businesses started to close, obviously we see that most of our familias work in the industries of the service industry, the restaurant industry, the construction industry. So those are the industries that were the hardest hit during the pandemic. And so now we see that 20%, according to this is why we decided to do the survey, because we wanted to see what sort of the overall impact. So 20% of people who lost their jobs, that's a lot of people. What we also found out is that a lot of people actually did not get unemployment because they don't qualify, and that's about 35%, 38% of people did actually not get unemployment because they don't qualify, or the other largest response was because they didn't know how to access, or they couldn't reach the state agency, the Department of Workforce Solutions, because they were being so busy.
Right. And another thing that the survey shows, 20% of parents or primary caregivers saw their business shut down or saw significant drops in revenue. So same type of thing, right? You've got a major impact to income coming into the family.
Yeah, and not just to the family, Scott. I think that's one of the largest takeaways of this survey is that, we don't live in an island. Immigrant families are part of larger cultures, larger communities. And I was just running the quick numbers, for you before we got on the show about sort of who are the immigrants in San Juan County. The majority of our members work in either the gas extraction industry or the service industry. Many people clean offices. Many people work in restaurants as cooks and other things. And so what we saw is that in San Juan County, when you look at the numbers, you have a 3% foreign-born population, right? And you might think that's not a lot. But when we're looking at a pandemic and most people don't live paycheck to paycheck, that stimulus money would have brought $1.4 million into San Juan County. Now, I know that we're all struggling. Everyone's struggling. We know the tall order that local governments have in keeping up with just providing the bare bones services, right? We know how everybody, especially local governments, have also been impacted because of less gross receipts taxes, right? And everything, the economy came to a standstill. And so what we see is that when we started to get that stimulus check, where does the money go to? It goes immediately injected back into our local economy. So like I was saying, it doesn't just impact that immigrant family, it impacts everyone who lives in that community. And that's why we are one of the reasons why we wanted to do this survey is because we wanted to really show also elected officials the importance of including everyone, and the importance even especially in rural communities, especially in rural communities where the safety networks are so minimal. It is important to ensure that everyone, because we're all feeling it, that everyone who's affected by the pandemic can get a stimulus check in this hard time.
Understood. My guest this morning, Elsa Lopez, is joining me from her office with Somos Un Pueblo Unido. We are talking about a recently released survey about COVID-19's impact on Latino families and their economic well-being in New Mexico, produced by Latino Decisions. And we invited a representative from Latino Decisions to join us this morning, but unfortunately they were unavailable. But Elsa, I appreciate you being with us to talk a little bit about this survey and some other results that I wanted to share with our listeners and viewers this morning, a little bit about some of the things that you found in this survey. 1 in 3, 33%, parents or primary caregivers have trouble paying for their rent or mortgage. And as you mentioned, we know a lot of folks in our state and our country are suffering, but this seems like a really high number to me.
It is a really high number. What happens when you don't have, one of the things is that we saw that the majority, like a large number of people only had about $1,000. 50% of people surveyed only had $1,000 or less in their savings account. So what does this mean? And this is something that I heard a lot when we were talking to our members. They would say, well, we're okay the first month, we're doing okay, but what's going to happen the second month, the third month, the fourth month? And so I've heard stories, from members who had to pay their property taxes and their credit cards. What does that mean? They're going to incur interest, right? Debt. They're gonna, what happens when you can't pay rent? Well, what I've heard mostly is that they will skip on other payments. So people have skipped on payments of car payments. They've skipped on maybe things that they wanted to do, maybe if they wanted to fix up the house, or if they wanted to invest on their college, on the children's college education, if they have people graduating or children graduating from high school, and so that directly impacts not just the well-being of the family now, but it really impacts the future of an entire community, because those children will be the future of those communities, like in San Juan County.
Very true, and I appreciate that. And another thing I wanted to point out, too, you mentioned that many folks that you had been speaking with had maybe $1,000, maybe for an emergency fund. But I think, too, what was fascinating to see, 24% of the survey results have less than $100 for emergencies. And that's an accurate number, correct? I mean, a lot of folks may find that very low, almost scarily so.
Yes, and so what we also, one of the very troubling numbers that we found through this survey is that 20% of people had to unfortunately lean into predatory lenders or get a loan from a predatory loan company, and so that really puts us backwards. And what that means, and the reason why this should impact, local governments should really care about this, is because in order for us to thrive economically in the future, we all have to be out of the hole together. When you leave entire families out of stimulus checks, stimulus packages in this case, you are literally leaving people in a hole. What that means is that when families, a lot of, as you say, 20% of people, according to the survey, lost their job, at least one person in the family, right? And then 48% of people actually saw their hours cut. So that means there is less income. So you're starting from not having enough savings, very little savings, right? And then you are excluded from a stimulus package that basically kept a lot of families afloat, including and also other ways that people are utilizing to survive this pandemic is unemployment. Well, you have a lot of families that have also been excluded, right? And so what you have is people in a hole. So when you start recovering, our worry is that these families will be pushed further into poverty, and the impact of not just that family but of their children would be felt for decades to come.
Right. And you mentioned that almost half of the folks that responded to the survey said they had their work hours cut, as you mentioned, or their pay was cut, but they kept their jobs. But you're right, that still doesn't help you pay the bills if money is tight or less coming into to the household. And so with these survey results, Elsa Lopez, are you in contact then with maybe the congressional delegation from New Mexico as they negotiate and talk in Washington, D.C. for maybe a next round of stimulus? We keep hearing there might be one, there might not be one, hard to say, but have these been sent to our senators and congressmen, and what's the reaction been if they've seen these results?
Very important question. Obviously, we also wanted to inform policy with these results, not just at the federal government, but at the state level and local level as well. And so, yes, we actually, at the same time that we released the results of the Latino Decision Survey, we also released a letter that we have been working on gathering signatures for about a month with our partners from throughout New Mexico, with 45 signatures from local elected officials, including Aztec Mayor Snow Culver and City Commissioner Mark Lewis from Aztec as well, and many other local elected officials to send a message to the congressional delegation of the importance of including undocumented immigrant families who pay taxes in the next round. And like you were saying, we know that the HEROES Act is what everybody's talking about now. The third, it would be, I think, the fourth round of economic relief during this pandemic was voted on at the end of May in the House and was passed. And in that version, it includes a clause that allows undocumented immigrants to be included in some kind of form of economic relief. But we hope that the Senate can also include that, and that we put aside partisanships. And the pandemic does not discriminate. The pandemic, one of the, I think I've heard many stories, Scott, from our members. One of the hardest things is that we see that immigrant families, immigrant workers are in many cases considered essential workers. But in what I hear a lot from our familias is that they feel forgotten. Even though they're essential workers, they are not being taken into account when it comes to economic relief and economic recovery programs by the local governments, by the state governments, by the federal governments. And we know this is a very tall order because this is a pandemic that is impacting us all. And unfortunately, what we see is that people are more scared of the economic impact than of the health impact of their family during that pandemic. So that puts us in real danger, to counteract the pandemic numbers. I mean, you are in San Juan County, it's a hot spot, right? Still, a lot of numbers of people are reluctant. I've seen people actually being reluctant to access food boxes. We have so many mutual aid groups coming out in really important programs like the ECHO program. Well, one of the first things that we had to do is to actually educate programs like that on the importance of not inquiring about Social Security numbers when you offer these kinds of services, because what was happening is that people were going without food for their children and really having a hard time. If you at least have access to a food box, right, you can then save that money for rent or paying your electric bill or other utilities, something as crucial right now as internet access for your children's education. And so, yes, the congressional delegation has been advised of this survey. We had met with both Senator Udall and Senator Heinrich, who had extended their support. So we hope that we can continue not just with their support, but with their advocacy and leadership to include all families that are being impacted regardless of immigration status.
Right. And this kind of talks a bit about the bigger issue, which is immigration policy in this state, and how there are so many individuals and families living in the United States, living in New Mexico, that are kind of in this limbo of being an undocumented immigrant, that if there was a path to citizenship, I imagine they would take advantage of that. But there isn't, or there's a lot of hurdles to jump through, and there's really no clear way forward. And I think if they could be a naturalized citizen, they would take that opportunity. Is that what you hear from your members too?
In a heartbeat. I mean, we've been fighting for immigration reform since, my gosh, 2006, under the Bush administration, when we thought he was going to be able to he actually presented a plan that was very reasonable. And what we saw, it was the dismantling of that effort. And so what we have now is more than 11 million undocumented immigrants in the country that have been, in many ways, are continue to be essential workers during the pandemic, continue to pay taxes. But unfortunately, you say, a lot of people tell me, well, why don't they just get in the line? Why don't they just become citizens? The easiest way for you to access some of the services is to become a citizen. And I got to tell you, Scott, I mean, every family that I talk to wants to legalize their status. No one is undocumented because they want to. It's in some instances, I got to tell you, I know people who have not become legal permanent residents, which is the first step in becoming citizens, because the cost is prohibitive. I'm talking, we are, the Latino Decision Survey, as you mentioned, told us that people live paycheck to paycheck, right, with very little savings. Well, to legalize your status, you sometimes need upwards of $10,000. And so sometimes the cost is just prohibited, but in many cases, it's just that there is no line.
Well, I was going to say it's the cost, but also the time too, isn't it? I mean, folks are waiting. This could take years in many cases to reach naturalized status, correct, or legal
Right.
status.
Yeah, and the fastest way is to marry someone, or
Right.
to legalize through marriage. That takes up to a year or 2 years, depending on the way that you came into the country. But most people, if you want to legalize, for instance, through your child, I know a lot of undocumented immigrant parents who have children who are now 21 years old.
Right.
But unfortunately, they can't legalize because if they came in without a passport, they have to go back to their country of origin and wait for 10 years to be let back in. And so that is a deterrent. And so, yeah, I mean, it takes up to 20 years in some instances if you try to legalize, for instance, with another family member, like your sister or brother. And so there is no line. I wish I could tell you there was a line, but what we continue to see is that these families are creative. We are raising children in these communities, like in San Juan County, and I gotta tell you that especially in San Juan County, I mean, I've organized all over New Mexico, and I have seen firsthand during this pandemic the real fear about even just accessing services like going to a food program, because they were afraid that their information was going to be shared with immigration. And as we know, and we've talked many times in your show and through other places, we have a full-time immigration agent stationed at the San Juan Sheriff's Department. And so that creates another challenge to the fact that immigrants were excluded. People are hesitant to share information with local services because they are afraid that that information might end up being shared with ICE locally.
Understood. And of course, we've talked too about how these families that you have mentioned have businesses. They are maybe some of our coworkers. They work side by side. I mean, a lot of you just wouldn't know and wouldn't need to know their status because they are as hardworking as anybody else. And we just had the 4th of July, Elsa Lopez, and I would say a lot of these families, if not all of them, are very patriotic, just like folks who were born in this country.
We certainly feel part of this community. For many of us, this is the only country that we know. For many of us, our parents have been coming to this country for years and years and years, are being left out during this pandemic. It's not just sad, but it's not just immoral, but it just doesn't make any economic or sense economically. Financially, it just, even if you don't believe that undocumented immigrants should be here, even to those people who tell me they should just go back and come here legally, to which you just alluded how hard it is to do so. We are already here. We are contributing. We are working. And so it only makes sense to include undocumented immigrant families, to include their U.S. citizen children during a pandemic relief, because that only lifts us all up. When we leave a segment of our community excluded, it really makes no sense financially for local governments either. So we really appreciate local governments standing up and bringing light to this issue, especially in New Mexico. We're one of the poorest states in the country. Immigrants, 10% of undocumented, 10% of the total population are foreign born. Most people are U.S. citizen and legal permanent residents. Only about 40% are undocumented. Yet we are excluding not just undocumented immigrants, but U.S. citizen children and U.S. citizen adults who are married to undocumented immigrant during this pandemic.
A very interesting conversation this morning, Elsa Lopez, but I'm afraid we are out of time. But thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. And if people want to know more information, I invite them to follow us on Facebook, Somos Un Pueblo, or visit our website, somosunpueblounido.org.
Okay, very good. Elsa Lopez, thank you very much. My guest this morning on KSJE from Somos Un Pueblo Unido. I'll be back with more in just a moment, everyone. The time is coming up on 8:40.
Here's a maybe not so wild idea. Tech companies should definitely make it someone's job to think about ethics. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace Tech. I'm Molly Wood.
Marketplace Tech is supported by Home Advisor, helping homeowners find the right pros for their home projects. Homeowners can now see upfront pricing, book appointments, and pay for over 100 projects with the Home Advisor app.
From hate speech to privacy to labor to biased algorithms, society is reckoning with the power of technology and the companies that